There is sweet sorrow, promises broke and care. Babies, they will be born, but there is weeping yet. These are the facts of life. Try to relax your mind. Rising sun, it will set. Remember, then forget. So simple but profound. Things you so come around. What goes up must come down. Always a lost and found. Some will fail, others win. Either way, start again. Truth, lies, fall, get back up. Life is fragile and tough. Hurry up, gotta wait. Say hello and then goodbye. Get in a rush just to be late. Whoa, laugh until you cry. Laugh until you cry. Fall to your weary knees. Some you will take off while there's others that you please. You feel so hurt and loved, glimmer of hope then shame. We are all different, but feelings roll the same. But time to speak your mind, but know when to shut up. Drop in ahead to pray, but have an empty cup. Everything's going fine. You cannot catch a break. See, hear, smile, live in the day. Serious time to play. Hurry up, gotta wait. Say hello and then goodbye. Get in a rush just to be late. Whoa, laugh until you cry. Laugh until you cry.
Hello and welcome. This is Kingdom in Context. I'm Sean, and I'm joined by my lovely wife, Lindsay.
Hey guys, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, sweetie.
Shabbat Shalom, babe.
That reminds me, I have to adjust from the last broadcast. There we go. All right. We're all three here. We want to thank you for joining us here on the Sabbath Fellowship. So just as a reminder, as always, this is a little bit different broadcast. We want to do we'll talk about some scriptures, just her and I, and you guys can obviously join us in the live chat. But this isn't an open invitation for debate. So it's okay if you disagree with some of our conclusions on the scriptures and how we understand them. But at the same time, let's not distract from people trying to enjoy or trying to actually learn today by starting strife, division, or argumentation in the live chat. After we discuss the scriptures, the latter half of this broadcast, we're going to be opening up the live chat to a Q&A. So hold your questions until then. We say it every week, but every week someone still drops an early question. If you drop your question while we're still talking about the scriptures and we have not opened the live chat yet, it's a high likelihood your question won't get answered because it gets lost in the chat. So hold your question until the latter portion of the show, and you have a higher opportunity for it to get answered. So thanks for being here, everybody.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we have so many people join after we do our little introduction
Yeah.
that they don't hear a lot of our requests. Basically, we try to make this somewhat kind of like an online church service.
Now,
Obviously
that's
it's
a bit
different.
strong, but
Let me go ahead and explain, okay? Obviously it's not an actual church service, but as far as the spirit and the behavior in the chat, we would like people to consider themselves to be kind of like at a church service watching a teaching and ask themselves, would I chit chat? Would I argue? Would I try and debate while the pastor is up actually speaking to the congregation? So while this is not a congregation like that, we're not pastors standing above people in a physical building. We try to encourage a little less interaction in the chat just during the teaching portion, just while we're reading the scriptures and discussing them, so that it's easier for everyone to focus on the actual teaching. Now, we understand that a lot of people like to fellowship in the chat. You guys like to say hi to each other, say Shabbat Shalom, all those kind of things. We totally understand that. We just like to encourage a little less of the back and forth in the chat just during the teaching. After the teaching, you guys can go wild in there for all we care. For me, just being totally honest, it helps me stay focused. I'm not as mature as my husband, and I tend to get distracted when I start seeing people arguing in the chat, when I see people saying random things that have nothing to do with what we're talking about, things like that. So it helps me focus on the teaching as well. And so that's kind of the environment that we like to encourage. So it's not a church service. I'm not saying it is, but for a lot of people, this is their fellowship every week. This is where they get their where they get fed every week on the Sabbath, and where they get to fellowship with some others virtually.
That's right. It is. That's why we call it a fellowship. And at the same time, we decided to do this with more of like a focused effort each Saturday as we go live and talk about different scriptures. So what that means is, if you jump in the live chat and you're trying to preach a sermon to everyone in the live chat, that has nothing to do with what we have a focused presentation to talk about today, then you may be put on mute, or the mods may ask you to refrain from spamming the live chat with your own personal sermon. Look, we get it. People get zealous about a topic. We understand that. It's what caused us to start our own channel. And so I would not go into Apologia's live chat and start talking about why they don't understand the gospel of the kingdom, because I understand if they're trying to talk about their abortion efforts, or their end abortion efforts with their subtangent ministry, where they advocate in front of legislatures to end abortion, then me trying to go in there about one of the topics I'm most passionate about at that time is not quite appropriate for that setting, for the people that try to engage in that live chat, for that whole scene, right? It just becomes not conducive to being respectful to the room you walk into, basically. So just keep that in mind, guys. But we do want to say a big thank you to the moderators that are here. And as always, we want to just encourage you that it's okay if people disagree with us. We don't want to remove them from the live chat. We want that to be a very last resort. You are allowed to use your moderate activities to try to encourage them into good behavior, as well as you can use the mute button as many times as you need to. But if they step into obvious contention, accusations, name calling, cursing, that kinds of things, then use the ban button if you have to. So today we wanted to talk about loving your enemies.
Yeah, probably the hardest command for a lot of us to follow.
Can be.
I mean, for me, it is. For me, it's hard because I'm not sure if I'm doing it or not. Like, there are a lot of people out there, a lot of groups, factions of people, major global elite type people that I consider my enemy. And I don't have feelings of love and affection towards them. I also don't necessarily want to see them go to destruction. I would like to see them saved and repent of their wicked ways. But it's like, do I love them? I don't know. I mean, they certainly make me feel angry a lot of the times, and I would like to see if I don't see them come to salvation, I would like to see them face judgment. But yeah, I think this is probably the hardest for me. This is probably the hardest command to actively keep, because sometimes I'm just really not sure how to.
It can be challenging. There's different circumstances. Like there's going to be context to the application, because each person is different. Each circumstance is different. Sometimes we may feel like people that disagree with us have made themselves our enemy, or they may view you as an enemy, even though you don't hold that disposition towards them in your hearts.
Right.
But they may treat you like one. And then other times, they may, like, there's genuine people that are full of unclean spirits that do treat you like an enemy and want to see your demise. Actually, they don't want to see your demise immediately. They want to see your torment before they see your death or your demise first. So they like to mock you while they oppress you. This is the attitude of unclean spirits. So that can come out of men whom are being oppressed or possessed by unclean spirits and not really fully in control of their faculties and not realizing what they're doing oftentimes. And it can be difficult. So we have a couple examples. We want to get to the scriptures real quick, and we want to take a look at, hopefully give us some different examples of this idea. Just 1 minute. Let me try to find it. There we go. Okay. So this is Luke chapter 6, verses 35 and 36. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend it to them. Expect nothing in return. Then your reward will be great, and you'll be sons of the Most High. For he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Now, does this mean that you need to lend to them if they have everything they need, and they're just asking you for money because they want to deplete you of your resources?
Oh, I'd say no.
Okay. Does this mean that you need to lend to someone who's mocking you and trying to entice you to abuse the command to lend to others?
No, I wouldn't think so.
So this would be for someone who may view you with bad attitude, but is genuinely in need.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So just so we have that qualifier. And so therefore it says Yahweh the Most High is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. And I think this is a fascinating little insertion because you don't get this in Matthew. So this is a fascinating insertion for me because in addition to saying love your enemies, do good to them and lend to them, expect nothing in return, it gives you the heart and disposition of the Creator. He says he's kind to the ungrateful and the wicked.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that it includes the ungrateful.
Yes. Yeah, because how many of us have done something for someone and felt that sting of how ungrateful they are for it?
Yes. And it's tough because we have personal experiences.
Yeah.
We have painful personal experiences, like extremely painful personal experiences in the past few years about trying to do good to others and being treated like an enemy for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so
or you do good for them and at first they seem grateful, but as time goes on, they start to reveal that, well, that wasn't enough.
Right.
That wasn't good enough. You could have done, and then put down the checklist of all the things that you should have done for them, aside from the really nice gesture that you already did.
Yeah, it can be very tough because you get to a point where you start to say, well, why should I help this person? Why should I want to extend myself? Because sometimes trying to do good for someone, you have to go out of your way.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not just simply, a flick of the wrist. It's not like a passing effort. Sometimes you have to, with great intentionality, go out of your way to do good to somebody.
Yeah.
And maintain that good that you're doing for them because there's details involved in whatever action you're doing for them.
Right.
It's rarely just I'm slip you a 20, and we're good.
Yeah.
Like you got to take care of details too. You've got to plan. You've got to do follow-up. And all along the way, you're just praying that person is not, is going to maintain their chill long enough to let this bless them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that can be a tricky thing, because they may be ungrateful. They may have this weird attitude, but they still may be genuinely in need.
Yeah.
And they may not be pushing you away, or may not be saying anything horrible to you as far as your character or slander you as a person, but they just may have a general sense of ungratefulness.
Yeah.
And it's very obvious for everyone to see. And that is very difficult.
Yeah,
Very
because
difficult to deal with.
that sense of ungratefulness, I believe, stems directly from a sense of entitlement. People who, just for some reason believe that everyone should be doing things for them when they refuse to do something for themselves, especially.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's especially when it's family. It can be,
Yeah.
it's one thing to, help someone from afar through a fundraiser, or, giving a random person, if you have a car you no longer need, and someone in your community needs a car, giving a person that car, and you never really see them again. But when you're doing nice things to help family, and those family are people with a serious sense of entitlement and a very serious lack of gratitude, and they're not believers, and they seem to have a spiritual part of them that wants to just attack you for your faith and tell you what a terrible Christian you actually are, it's like, it is very hard.
Now, I've even experienced that from self-proclaimed Christians.
Yeah.
Right. Where maybe like 4 years ago, there was a gentleman I tried to help. He was in a different state, and he was struggling, saying he was living out of his car and that he needed some help. And I said, well, sure, man, I'd love to help you, because he wanted us to do a fundraiser for him.
Right.
And I said, I'd love to help you, but I got to ask you some questions first.
Yeah.
Right. Some basic common sense questions.
Because we knew something
was
details.
off. Yeah. We knew there was more than likely there was some addiction happening here, and there was some things going on. And so I recommended something called Celebrate Recovery, which was at some churches in his town, which is a free resource that many churches offer for people who have struggling with traumas, hurts, hangups, and addictions. They can go there and get free brotherly counsel. And there's a systematic program they can walk through with the Celebrate Recovery program. And it doesn't cost them anything except their time, except their dedication, except their willingness to address what's going on in their life and to overcome it. And this person took such offense that I even asked him if he was struggling with any addiction in his life. And then I directed him towards a free resource that he could go to after he was done with work, and hopefully meet some people in his area for other resources, right? Because there's a lot of churches that participate in these kinds of free help services for people,
right,
especially within their congregation, but also to the outside community. And they know of other food pantries and other things to help people get back on their feet. And he rejected all of that. And to me, it was like, that's a clear sign of someone they're not wanting your help. They want a specific thing.
Yes.
And they're trying to manipulate you into a specific thing, which is, hey, can you get money from me?
Yeah, unfortunately, Sean and I have run into this a lot, because we do have a wonderful reach, and the people who follow our ministry are incredibly giving. Yeah. And we have been able to raise thousands and thousands of dollars for people genuinely in need, where we've assessed the situation and money will help the situation. There are so many situations out there where money may be a temporary fix, but if there's all kinds of behaviors and decisions made leading up to causing someone to be living in poverty, basically, and they need ongoing money, they need to change their habits, they need the motivation to work, find a better job. Like, when there are situations where throwing money at it is only a temporary fix, Sean and I, we don't take on those kinds of fundraisers for people, because for us, if we're really going to help somebody, we need to be able to counsel them through those issues and help them create a future for themselves where they're not making choices that lead them into financial despair.
And that's if we feel qualified to counsel.
Exactly. And we don't. That's why we don't take those on.
Yeah, we don't extend our, we're not saying that we offer counseling to anybody. We've made this very clear in the past. We do not offer marital counseling. We are not qualified for that. We do not offer addiction counseling. We're not qualified for that. Yeah. So as we vet the person in the situation, if there's anything we can do to show sustainability for the resources we might transfer to them, so they're not squandered or lost too quickly or
Yeah.
whatever, and so they can truly be a blessing to them.
And that's why
Yeah.
you guys, you'll see that the type of fundraisers that we bring before you are matters of someone with a severe illness who needs treatment, women who've been newly widowed,
Yeah.
and they're losing their house and they have to move to a new rental, and all these changes are happening that money will, in that short amount of time, be a very great help. But there's a lot of situations out there that, money is, it may help right in the moment, but also money in the wrong hands.
Right.
If you're giving money to someone who clearly has an addiction problem, and we don't live in that area, we can't go pay the rent for this person ourselves. Like that, ideally, if we were going to help someone in that situation, that's how we would want to do it. We want them to be living in our area where we can go write those checks ourselves, and we're not handing money off to someone who is struggling with addiction and may just go spend it on their addiction or other frivolous things. So yeah, and unfortunately people get their feelings hurt really bad because they think we're judging them, but the reality is we're really trying to help. I mean,
it's a gauge of their heart, though.
Yeah.
It's part of the vetting process is gauging the person that does need help. Do they truly want help? Are they gonna, are they trying to manipulate the system? Because there are charities out there that will allow you to manipulate the system. This is why the John 3:16 missions force the folks to listen to a sermon before they give them food or shelter for the night, because they know that these people will just come take the free resources, come in for 6 hours and sleep in a cot, and then leave again and go back to their drug-induced, dazed all day ways, and so like it becomes a problem, right? Where you have to gauge the willingness of the person to truly ask for help and show a sense of gratitude in some regard. Even regardless of that, the Father helps those who are ungrateful.
Yeah, he does. And that's the thing is, if people are willing to go find the help in their local areas, it's there. I lived on the poverty line almost my whole life. I mean, we weren't necessarily poor as a family when I was a child, but we definitely did not have money. And then when I got into my 20s, unfortunately, my parents had not taught me many life skills and how to have a savings and how to find the kind of job that would provide me the type of money that I need to actually rent my own place and things like that. And I really struggled. I made very minimum wages, and I rented rooms from people, and I lived off the food bank for years. But I went to the food bank. I went to the clothing closets at the churches. Like I knew all the places locally that could provide me with household items, clothing, and food. And so a lot of times I'll see people who are saying they don't have any food, they need help, they need money. And I will be Googling their city and looking up all the food pantries in their city and offer them that information. And people get offended by that because they don't want to be told, here's how you can help yourself. Here's how you can do it. I mean, I rode the bus for years. I didn't have a car. Now, I didn't have children. I was just a single woman. So I know that there are some other aspects to this that can be a little more difficult for people, but I also saw women with their babies and their strollers and everything on the buses and doing just fine. So sometimes it's hard for me. Sometimes I don't even approach certain situations. I just scroll past the posts because I want to tell that person how I was able to help myself and find all the resources I needed when I was in that kind of situation. But that's not what they want to hear. They just want you to give them, want you to send to their Cash App. So I think that there's definitely, with the advent of social media, there's been an attitude created among people where let's just start a fundraiser for this. I mean, even some of my closest relatives, some tragedy happened, and the first thing they wanted to do was start a fundraiser, and we were like, well, we can afford that all between ourselves. We don't need to do a fundraiser for that. So I think that's just the tendency that a lot of people have because it seems like the easy fix. Anyways, that's a whole nother tangent.
Mm-hmm. So the goal is, even if they're ungrateful, even if they're acting wickedly, we gave a truck a couple years ago to a close family member. He was ungrateful for it. He wanted something different. He had no vehicle. We gave him a free truck. Yeah. He was ungrateful for it. So, it just becomes one of those issues where, unfortunately, it even got to the point where it caused additional strife because he wasn't handling it well.
Yeah, so it was a truck that I had been given.
Let's go to these other scriptures before we get too deep in all that. Okay. was just trying to give a quick summary. So the whole idea is that we just want to be merciful, just as the Father is merciful. And you're going to have to use your brain to apply these scriptures. Okay. That's why we've been given all these caveats for the last 20 minutes on this one particular passage. That's why I opened it up saying you do not lend to people who are just trying to deplete your resources. You do not lend to people who are trying to mock you and abuse your goodwill. You do not lend to people who want to steal from you. You do not lend to people who are not abiding in ways to help themselves into stability because they're just abusing a system or your charity. So there's a difference, but you do want to be kind to the ungrateful. That means you may have to investigate and take the time to talk with them about what their circumstances are and look for active solutions. It doesn't always mean you're going to have to pull out your checkbook or pull out your wallet, right? So just your thoughts are required in this. Your active participation, that is a part of you being kind, is you're actively engaging in trying to determine how's the best way to help this person. It may not be just random money. It may be you have to seek out in your city a church who already has a ministry dedicated for whatever this guy's or person's going through. So that just hopefully that's helpful to anyone that's ever read that and thought they're on the hook for being abused. You're not on the hook for being abused. Okay. Proverbs 24:17-18. Do not gloat when your enemy falls. Do not let your heart rejoice when he stumbles, or the Lord will see and disapprove and turn his wrath away from him. So this is a fascinating one.
This can be very difficult, especially in the world we live in today where, we have a 24-hour news cycle. We see lots of people who we might consider our enemy fall. We see, people who wanted to force us to get jabs. We see them get sick from those jabs and die from those jabs. And I see a lot of people online who don't have the right reaction to that, where they want to be like, oh, I told you so. Ha ha ha. Oh, claps for the unjabbed. Ha ha ha. We're not dying suddenly, and those kind of things. And while I understand that feeling,
you
but
definitely don't want to relish or encourage in it, because it's all you're doing is you're asking for calamity to come upon the deceived, right? People that were deceived into something versus, and yes, while they were deceived, they may have tried to get you to be deceived as well. And that's the nature of deception. But to see their literal death and demise as a result of that deception, definitely, the Father's encouraging us, hey, don't rejoice when you see their downfall. And this reminds me of David and Absalom. Absalom was deceived and spent 20 plus years undermining David, trying to take over the throne. And in the last throes of Absalom's life, after he dies, David's mourning, and I think it's Joab, the commander, comes up to David and he's like, why are you crying? This guy tried to kill you and take your throne. He took your wives in public on the rooftop. Like, why are you crying over this guy? He deserves to die. And there was this weird moment where David took the advice of Joab and said, you're right. I don't need to let the people see me crying. But between Joab and David in the back rooms, David's heart was not rejoicing that Absalom, the guy who tried to kill him and overthrow his kingdom, he was not rejoicing that he died. He was just in the same way he didn't rejoice when Saul was persecuting him and chasing him down. This is why in that moment, I don't remember the exact chapter in 1 Samuel, but in that moment where David had taken a piece of his garments and then shouts out to him later at night from the cliffside, and then Saul realizes what happened and who he was, and he shouts out to David, you are more righteous than I am. I'm seeking to kill you, and you spared my life. So that was a point where all the people around David could have told him, you're justified to kill Saul. He's trying to kill you unrighteously. Like, he's killing the priests of Yahweh. He's abandoning the faith and the covenant. Like, we should kill this man. And David was like, no, I feel like the Lord's telling me not to kill him, and I should not touch the Lord's anointed until the Lord touches him, or the Lord directly tells us his time is done. And so there was this standard David was trying to abide by. And while he did that, he was trying to maintain a soft heart towards those who wanted to kill him. Even when the military people around him were like, dude, they deserve to die. Don't feel bad about that, But it was the heart of David that Yahweh says was a man after his own heart. And that's a disposition I think we could all probably learn from.
Yeah, and I would just like to point out that there's a lot of anti-missionaries out there, and there's actually a lot of dispensationalists out there who will tell you that the first verse that we read from the New Testament is Jesus adding to Torah, that loving your enemies is not a Torah command. So part of the teaching Sean and I wanted to do today was to point out these areas in the Old Testament where we clearly see this being practiced. There may not be a thou shalt not hate your enemies explicit statement in the 5 books that we have, but there's clearly.
You mean the 5 first books of the canon? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The books that most people call the Torah, that's traditionally referred to as the Torah. They'll use that as an argument to either say as mainstream Christians, oh, see, Jesus changed the law, or as anti-missionaries and say, see, Jesus changed that law. He's not really the Messiah. So,
but I've got some verses from those books.
Yeah, we've got some great verses to show you guys today that this was not something that was new. This wasn't a new command.
So Proverbs 25, if your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For in doing so, you will heap burning coals in his head, and the Lord will reward you. Sounds very much like Romans chapter 12.
Yeah.
Paul's repeating this encouragement here. And so this is a direct command. If your enemy's hungry, thirsty, help him out.
Yeah.
So that's pretty amazing. Do you think that this person is grateful? It doesn't matter whether he's ungrateful or grateful.
Right.
If he hates you because he views himself as your enemy, regardless of how you view him, maybe you do view him as your enemy. We're supposed to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Which means, guess what? We have to interact. We have to communicate. We have to extend a gesture of peace towards our enemies, right? And this isn't just smoking peyote with the peace pipe. Like, this is like real, practical, tangible. Look, he's hungry. He's thirsty. Go to your enemy. Try to help him out. Obviously, you don't want him to shoot you. So you have to gauge your scenario of how you can get to your enemy and help him. We're going to show some examples in a little bit, but sometimes there's examples in the Old Testament of people doing good to their enemies up on the threat of death. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So Leviticus 25, verse 35 says, now if your countryman becomes destitute and cannot support himself among you, then you are to help him as you would a foreigner or stranger, so that he can continue to live among you. So this already assumes you're helping the foreigner and the stranger,
Right.
not to be poor.
Right.
So this is amazing, right? So now in ancient Israel's context, many of the nations around ancient Israel did not like Israel, and so they would have considered themselves enemies of Israel. But if for whatever reason some of those enemies were living amongst them as foreigners and did not have a bad attitude towards Israel, you were not to just put them into the blanket widespread category of, oh, he's our enemy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that what Jonah did?
Yeah, Jonah is a great example of someone who very much struggled with this particular command.
So Jonah was upset that he was called as a prophet to go to Assyria, whom was a nation that had just previously invaded northern Israel and scattered them and took many into captivity. And Yahweh tells Jonah to go to Assyria and preach repentance to them, that they would turn to the laws of Yahweh. And Jonah doesn't want to do this because he knows there's a chance that they could repent and Yahweh would accept them, because he knows the Father's merciful. So he tries to run.
Yeah.
So that is actually the reason he tries to run. A lot of people don't realize this.
Yeah.
Because he had hatred for his enemies. So the moral of the story is not the resurrection and the whale spitting him on dry land. The moral of the story is not even the Ninevites actually turning to repentance from their wicked ways. The moral of the story is God was trying to further disciple a prophet's heart.
Yeah.
Think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
A prophet's heart. So the prophet already was supposed to be somebody whose heart was dedicated and circumcised to the law of God and to the heart of God. So this guy still needed further discipleship in his bad attitude, because he had just lived through the invasion of his people and saw them scattered, many of them killed. And he had animosity toward those enemies that invaded him, even though that invasion was prophesied and justified according to the covenant, because Yahweh said, look, if you continue to worship the gods of the other nations, which included killing your own children, drinking blood, fornicating with the temple idols and prostitutes, if you continue to do all these horrific, horrible things, I'm going to let your enemies invade you because I need you to get you out of my land. You cannot do this in my land. I don't want you doing this in my land. So the rebellious Israelites snubbed their nose to the Almighty and continued to do those things in his land. So then he, just like he promised in Leviticus 26, he allowed the foreign nations to come in and invade and remove the people that had been unfaithful to the covenant and had been so treacherous in their false, how do I say this? Their false dedication to the covenant of Yahweh and to Yahweh himself. So Jonah knew this. He knew the story. He knew the writings of Moses. He knew the understanding. One second.
And the Ninevites were Babylonians, weren't they?
Yeah, it was all a part of the Babylonian Empire. But remember, there's different kingdoms inside the empire. Later, the Babylonian Empire moved its capital from Babylon to Assyria for a short time, to Nineveh, and then back to Babylon. But that's another story. So the point is, the whole concept here is that even a prophet of Yahweh still needed some discipleship, still needed to get his heart corrected by Yahweh, and he multitasks and uses that moment of teaching Jonah to have the right heart of Yahweh while sending him to a nation who had just invaded them and was pagan, worshiping false gods, and being a conquering nation that was unjust. So there's more to the story here, which is why we're going to read about Tobit in just a minute, because he was actually one of those people that got scattered and taken into captivity by the Assyrian invaders, right? And he knew, and Tobit even knew about the prophecies of Jonah. And we'll see what Tobit's heart was like while in captivity.
Yeah.
Right? So, but before we go there, let's read Exodus 23, 4 and 5. It says, if you counter your enemy's stray ox or donkey, you must return it to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you fallen under its load, do not leave it there. You must help him with it. So for all the people that believe that the first 5 books of the modern canon, Genesis through Deuteronomy, are the actual Torah, that's not the definition of Torah. That's the rabbinical Judaism definition of Torah. But if that's your mindset, which we discourage that mindset, we encourage you to actually study the definition of the word Torah and learn about the fullness of the instructions of God. Even within that poor parameter, Exodus 23 tells you to love and do good to your enemy here. Right? Yeah. If you encounter your enemy's stray ox or donkey, that's his property that helps him acquire wealth or transportation of his family for goods and safety and provision. So if you see your enemy broken down on the side of the road, help him change his tire, help him call an Uber, whatever, right? You must help him. This is the idea. You can't this is the story of the Good Samaritan that Jesus preached, right? Luke 12. So this is another example from Exodus 23. You gonna make it today, baby?
This happens every time we get on. I start to have this yawning thing. I'm not actually tired.
Okay.
Right. I was fine before we started the broadcast. So yeah, it's either my throat needing to be cleared or me yawning uncontrollably. So it's not you, it's me, babe.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, if you get tired, you need to step away. I understand.
No, I'm okay.
All right. So let's read real quick in Tobit chapter 1. We're going to get an example of Tobit is actually taken into captivity from the Assyrian invaders. What kind of heart did he maintain while he was actually in captivity amongst his enemies? So this is in Tobit chapter 1. He says, I, Tobit, have walked all the days of my life in the ways of truth and justice, and did many alms, that's acts of charity, and deeds to my brethren and to my nation, who came with me to Nineveh, into the land of the Assyrians. And when I was in my own country, in the land of Israel, being but young, all the tribe of Naphtali, my father, fell from the house of Jerusalem. That means they rebelled against the covenant, which was chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, Jerusalem, Judah, being chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, that all the tribes should sacrifice there, where the temple of the habitation of the Most High was consecrated and built for all ages. Now, all the tribes together revolted, and the house of my father Naphtali sacrificed unto the heifer Baal. But I alone went often to Jerusalem to the feasts, as it was ordained unto all the people of Israel by an everlasting decree. A temporary decree or an everlasting decree, huh? Yeah, as long as the temple was standing, it was an everlasting decree. That extends itself 40 years after Yeshua resurrected and ascended to heaven, right? So, but I alone went often to Jerusalem to the feasts, as it was ordained unto all the people of Israel by an everlasting decree. So he alone, this means he just says, all the tribes revolted, and the house of my father Naphtali sacrificed to Baal, but Tobit's not sacrificing to Baal. That means he's living amongst people who now view him as an enemy.
Yeah.
Because they did not like, if they're worshiping Baal, they didn't like Yahweh. Okay. And he alone went to Jerusalem to continue worshiping Yahweh. He's supposed to, now he's outnumbered, unfortunately, but he's supposed to, according to Deuteronomy 13, remove the Baal worshipers from the land of Israel. So he also is supposed to view them as an enemy to the covenant, but that doesn't mean you don't show them kindness and love and mercy, right? But sometimes you have to enforce, like Deuteronomy 13, people that are trying to get you to worship a false god.
Yeah,
right?
or even, when the Father sent in bees and wasps and, all kinds of different ways, and even the armies of Israel to drive out certain
there's a
people
time
groups.
There's a time of
and
judgment
place for these things, but
so what I'm getting at is, even before he went into captivity, he was already surrounded by enemies that he used to consider brothers. Think about that. So he's been betrayed by his own people who went against the covenant, and he alone is trying to keep the covenant. And of course, that's where he says he would go to take his first fruits and tenths of increase of that which was first shorn. And I gave them to the altar to the priests, the children of Aaron. And that's Tobit chapter 1, 3-6. Further on down in the same chapter, he says, and in the time of Enemesser, I gave many alms to my brethren. Now, this is when he's already in captivity in Assyria, in Nineveh. He says, I gave many alms to my brethren and gave my bread to the hungry. I gave my clothes to the naked. And if I saw any of my nation dead or cast about the walls of Nineveh, I buried him. So keep in mind.
Sorry.
It's okay, baby. The first people, the very same people that were his brethren in Israel that were supposed to be worshiping Yahweh with him, that caused him to be taken into captivity and being invaded because they transgressed the covenant, both the kings and the priests and many of the leaders. The same people that he was supposed to be able to depend on betrayed him, transgressed the covenant. He's suffering because of their bad mistakes, being taken into captivity. And while in captivity, whenever any one of them dies from persecution by the Assyrians, he goes to try to bury them. Or if any one of them are in starvation because of their captivity, he goes to try to give them food or clothes. So he's showing love to the people that betrayed him and caused him to go into captivity. This is a heart that I don't even know if I have yet.
Yeah.
This is incredible. This is absolutely the heart of Yahweh. So he goes, I buried them secretly, for in wrath he killed many. Talking about, let me go back up a little bit. It says, if the king Sennacherib had slain any who fled from Judea. This is the same Sennacherib you see in Isaiah chapter 38, who brought 185,000 men to besiege Jerusalem, right? So they're still actively enemies of the people of Israel. He says, if the king Sennacherib had slain anyone who fled from Judea, I buried them secretly, for in his wrath he killed many, but the bodies were not found when they were sought for by the king. So this is an example of him upon the threat of death, having to go and show love to those who had betrayed him, and caused him to go into captivity. It's crazy. That's great. And of course, if you read the full book of Tobit, you see how God blesses him for this behavior, enriches his life greatly, because allows him, even in captivity, it blesses him with grandchildren, allows his son to go find a wife who was, his rib that was waiting for him, basically. So it's an amazing story about the heart of Tobit. And at the very end of, I think it's in chapter 13 or 14 of Tobit, he talks about that he had heard the prophecy of Jonah, how Nineveh was going to be destroyed, but it was delayed for a while because they repented.
Yeah.
Because the Ninevites repented. And if you read Arikaba, I think is his name, or Akiba, I don't think I said that right, but there's one of the cousins of Tobit actually becomes one of the chancellors in the court for the king of Assyria because of his good behavior, just like Daniel and the three Hebrews in the story of Daniel in the Babylonian court. The same thing took place in the Assyrian court, where one of Tobit's extended relatives was placed in a position of influence to the king in that court because he was still following the Torah, and he stood out amongst the other people, even though he was a captive from Israel, and he was put into a place of significance. And so to me, that's like to me, it's like this orchestration moment here where the Father is setting up the king of Assyria for conversion.
Yeah.
He's putting men of the Torah around him and noticing, hey, your behavior is different. I like that. I can trust you. Let me put you next to me. You can be my advisor and help me with matters pertaining to administrating the kingdom. And here comes a prophet of that same people with that same supposedly showing that same heart and calling the king to that same behavior. The king actually repents. And it staves the judgment off of Assyria for 100 years. That's amazing, right? So what I'm trying to get at is, had Tobit been a soured, bitter, unloving person who encouraged his own family and brethren to abandon Yahweh because they were, he falsely accuses Yahweh of them being taken into captivity, right, unjustly when it was just, right? Had he been that kind of person, and had Jonah had not been willing to actually change his heart and walk through the process to go preach repentance to the Ninevites, you would have, a lot of people may not be in the kingdom right now amongst the former enemies of Israel, including some of the previous Israelites who had rebelled and been taken into captivity, who also repented at that time. To think about it. So even after he had to punish them for abandoning the covenant while they were in the land and they were dispersed out of the land, he's still working on their heart to repent and come back to them, even though they're in captivity. And this is what he promises in Deuteronomy 30 and Leviticus 26. He says, while you're in captivity, if you seek me and call out to me, I'll return to you. Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 10 through 12. This is the thing he tells them, like, just because I had to divorce you from the land doesn't mean I'm not going to abandon you. I'll still return to you if you start doing my ways again, if you prepare your heart. So a part of that is you're faced with another application of his Torah, of his law, which is to love your enemies, if suddenly your enemies have the upper hand on you and you're in their own captivity. So in the same way, it's all I can do to pray for Joe Biden.
Yeah, actually, that brings me to a passage that we didn't have on our list that I wanted to also include in this. This is Jeremiah 29, verses 4 through 7. And this says, thus says the Lord of the hosts, the God of Israel, to all who were carried away captive, whom I have caused to be carried away from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and dwell in them. Plant gardens and eat their fruit. Take wives and beget sons and daughters, and take wives for your sons, and give your daughters to husbands, so that they may bear sons and daughters, that you may be increased there and not diminished. And seek the peace of the city where I have caused you to be carried away captive, and pray to the Lord for it. For in its peace, you will have peace.
That's right.
So I definitely see a lot of people in our crowd who they have a righteous anger towards the American government. I'm with you guys on that. Even the very foundings of this country can be called into question as far as some of the religious beliefs of the founders themselves.
The deists, the occultists.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I see an outright demonization of our country completely, and where in this Torah crowd, you're not allowed to have any kind of patriotism. You're not allowed to have any kind of pride and love for your country itself, just because of these negative aspects of the government.
And we're not talking about worshiping flags.
No, yeah. It's
Right.
not about saying a Pledge of Allegiance. It's not even about standing and putting your hand on your heart for the national anthem. For me, it's about a certain level of gratitude. I mean, I'm a history nerd. I know our history. I know the bad parts of it. I also know the really good parts of it. I know the parts of it that totally benefit me today and help protect me from the evil parts of our government that would like to see certain principles and certain parts of our Constitution just completely destroyed.
Yeah.
So
how many letters have we found from historians, from Revolutionary War soldiers who are writing letters to their family, praising God, thanking God, sharing their belief that God was going to get them through. You see that in the Civil War also.
Yeah.
The situation is, we may not agree with the political decisions being made at in a grand scale, but the people that have sacrificed to be where we are today, and this unfortunately runs into the ultra conspiracy crowd that every single conflict is somehow master manipulated.
Yeah.
Yes, we understand that the enemy uses warfare as a tool. I teach that it's a part of the Babylonian Empire strategy. but at the same time, there's good-hearted people that go into there that have truly prevented bad things from happening further.
Right.
So I don't think the enemy has as much manipulative puppet master power as we give them, because at the same time that the enemy wants to start a conflict or war, the Father has his army of angels going out into the earth to do things. At sometimes
still
to stop
works on
things,
the
and other
earth.
times to bless things, to pull people through. Like I mentioned earlier, Isaiah 38, Sennacherib, engaging in the practice of Babylonian warfare, decided to go besiege Jerusalem to destroy it. The Father sent one angel and thwarted that whole plan. Simultaneously, according to historians, you don't see this in the Hebrew scriptures. According to historians, simultaneously, Herodotus says that the Egyptians were also being attacked by Sennacherib with a whole nother piece of the army. And they also were destroyed and routed miraculously as rats came and chewed off the leather patches that held up their shields. So when they went out to battle, all their shields fell off. And so then they were slaughtered. So Sennacherib, this is why his two sons killed him later, lost almost his entire army that was going out and unrighteously attacking people through manipulative warfare. The Father thwarted his plans and saved good people. All the people of Jerusalem, many of the good people that were in Egypt at the time. You have to look at the history of the Israelites that went to Egypt in different ways. So the point is, if we just throw this blanket conspiratorial view over all of history, or even over all the nation that you're in, it can cause you to demonize other people's sacrifice and good efforts for what they thought they were defending, innocent people, or defending their land in a righteous way. And so I just think we need to be very measured in how we discuss, or maybe how we consider some of the sacrifices, some of the formations of the history of this nation, as well as some of the intentions of active military duty people, as well as previous history military duty people, because it's not like they just were intentionally going out there to do wickedness. No, they thought they were going out there for a just cause. And so I just think there might need some to control our tongue a little bit in that regard.
Yes, controlling our tongue is really the important part, because we do slide into this category of hating our enemies when we do this, because I'm not saying that every single person in the American government is our friend, but it's also true that not every person in government is our enemy. There are a lot of brothers and sisters in the faith who are in government and trying to do good things in our country. The point of that passage from Jeremiah is about the attitude that we're supposed to have while we're scattered amongst this country. We're not supposed to be here begrudging it the whole time and having nothing to say about it and hoping for its downfall. We're supposed to pray for the peace of our country.
That's right.
We're also not supposed to separate from all of our fellow citizens and create little communes where we're just living with other people who keep Torah, and we don't have to be around any of the unclean, unwashed masses who don't believe. Like he's saying, grow where I plant you. Where he plants you, that's where you're supposed to grow. He
Because
doesn't say
you can affect those around you.
Yes,
you know the truth.
we're supposed to shine our light and not put it under a bush. And Sean and I see, it's not that Sean and I don't understand the desire for people to live in a community of like-minded believers. All of us have that desire, but we have to remember that's what the kingdom is. We're
Right.
going to get to do that in the kingdom, but he scattered us into this world for a reason. And part of it is to be shining his light among our enemies. And another important thing is recognizing who's an actual enemy and who's just maybe not your friend, maybe just your neighbor, not a fellow believer.
We're just deceived. Yeah. Like, people that you've seen me debate where they look at me and they say, oh, you're not of the faith. Like, I'm not going to view that as them as an enemy at that point. I'm still going to love them, even though they have a weird deception going on in their brain, in their heart. They're very misinformed and they've got a wonky doctrine. Okay. I'm still going to love them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I
I'm
think
going to do that tonight when I talk to Carlos.
I would categorize people who want to see our downfall, who want to see the eradication of our faith on this earth. I would see those people as our enemies. And there's a lot fewer of those in the world than there are just other people in the world that don't actively want to see the eradication of the Christian/Torah faith, whatever you want to call our faith. Because there are people in this world who are absolutely under the influence of unclean spirits. Some people who know they're under the influence of demonic spirits, and their motivations are evil and wicked. And those are the people who we would put in the category of our enemies. So even family members who we've had to, stop speaking to because they've taken advantage of our kindness and they've abused us in return for it, I don't see those people as my enemy. I see them as family that I deeply love and care for, but I have to protect myself from. And so I actively turn them over to the Lord and lift them up every day in prayer and genuinely want to see them being healed of whatever personality disorders they have that are causing them to treat others that way. So even people who have, done us wrong, very wrong, are not our enemies. I have an ex who sexually assaulted me, and I went through a really hard time period of really having severe hatred towards him and just having fantasies of being able to torture him. And I didn't like that. It made me feel heavy and gross. I really didn't like that. And this was before I even became a believer. And I had an understanding that I had to cry out to my higher power, is what I called it at the time, to help me learn how to forgive him and let go of that hatred so that I wasn't walking around with that heavy burden on me. And even him, I don't look at him as an enemy. I look at him as a very tortured soul who really, really, really needs the Father to heal him. But again, that was a process for me.
That's even if he's still alive.
Yeah, that's even if he's still alive. But even still, if he were dead of an overdose somewhere, that would still make me sad for his soul and the fact that, if he didn't find salvation before then and have his life changed. But that was a process for me because it's a natural feeling to feel hatred towards people who have done you so wrong.
Can I comment on that real quick before we move on? So you just mentioned a pretty extreme case of assault, abuse, rape. So I just we're not saying to the ladies out there that you got to go hang out with someone like that. Let me just say this real quick. All I'm trying to, I've told her before, if that gentleman ever found out where she is and showed up at there would be no questions asked. I might have to handle this man. There is no interaction anymore, ever. Okay. There's never going to be an interaction. I'm never going to try to foster a situation where they have a sit down. It's going to be a very firm and strong-handed, you're going to stay far away and keep your distance, and we're going to love you from a distance, but we're not going to allow you to be in proximity so that you could ever, because you've now absolutely lost the privilege to be in her proximity while I'm her husband. Okay. If we lived in ancient Israel, he would already be dead. So that's just to understand the law that was adjudicated in ancient Israel, especially for people with that type of violent tendency, he would already be dead, and it might already be by my hand, but I don't know. It depends on the circumstances. But in the future, now in this society that we live in, since we're not in a perfect ideal ancient Israel with the law of God being adjudicated by the Levites and a judge system that's that's ordained by God, and we have corrupt politicians, and we've got political interests and lobbies and all kinds of corrupt DAs and all kinds of things. So in this modern situation we live in, you have to, the rules that I can play within so that I can continue to be her husband and provider, and I don't get sent to jail myself, which then would leave her only vulnerable to men like that. Mm. So I have to play within a certain set of boundaries within that law. Now, obviously, if he crosses even those boundaries, I'll take action. So the point is, we're not saying to women who may have experienced something like that you have to reconcile or be around them. We're just asking that in your own personal hearts that you deal with the pain, let them not be a source of hatred, because that's going to emotionally separate you from what God wants to do with your life.
Yeah, my point was that I don't see him as an enemy. Even someone like that, I wouldn't put in the category of my enemy. So, but even if they are our enemies, we're supposed to love them. So that's the ultimate.
It's tough, especially when people abuse you.
A
lot of people listening right now, they may have been inappropriately touched as children, and that some of those people may have been family members, and you have to see them at Thanksgiving or at family get-togethers or at reunions or whatever. And so, we still are called to love people, and bad things happen. Bad things happen, man.
Yeah.
But if you can be reconciled and you can deal with it in your own heart, and then you let the Father work out a physical reconciliation if that's what is desired. But Dealing within your heart is the first and foremost, so that you can keep your heart
Yeah.
circumcised to the Father and tender to his ways. Because if you allow the past hurts to cauterize your heart and make it hard like stone, you're not going to be open to loving others. And this, I know some people may claim what I'm about to say is a conjecture, but I've seen it so much in my life that to me it's a reality. Is that if your heart is cauterized because of what someone else did to you, you're going to treat others with that same cauterized heart, and they've never done any wrong to you. And you're still going to be cold, calloused, unloving, and non-tender to other people who've never offended you or hurt you, because you are not practicing to softening your heart. You're allowing it to stay cauterized because of one person who hurt you in the past.
I can completely testify to that, because I went through a period where I hated men in general. I had this horrible hatred and distrust for all men everywhere. And the only thing that got me through it at the time, before I had Yeshua and the Father in my life, was thankfully I was working the NA program, and there happened to be a lot of very decent, good, upstanding men working that program. We call them the old timers, men who I felt like were other father figures for me in my life and made me feel safe when I was around them. But other than that, I really struggled with just a general hatred towards men. I swore off men completely for the rest of my life. I was never going to date again. And, you know, it was only by the grace of God that Sean was brought into my life. And I feel like God spoke to me, and there was just something where the first time we spoke on FaceTime, I knew like immediately that he was supposed to be my husband. I don't know how I knew that. It was just something inside me, but I felt comfortable speaking to him. I felt safe speaking to him. I felt, I just didn't feel all the ways I had, gathered up within myself to feel towards men to protect myself from ever being hurt like that again. Those walls just came down through the man who, God made me for. But yeah, I can attest to that. You, if you're not careful, your heart will become cold and callous and closed off to complete strangers who don't deserve any of your anger. But you have this need to project it onto them because of the pain that you're going through. So
before we start taking questions, I just want to address one last thing, and I want to address it very, very quickly. Less than 2 minutes. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. This is a whole nother show, probably. We see people make comments often in our chat whenever we mention things about interacting in the current state you're in. I know there's people that watch us from all over the world. So whatever country you're in, it may not be a predominantly Christian country or even community that you live in, and you may feel isolated and alone, or sometimes you may feel oppressed by whatever. And there's a common retreat mechanism within so many people who've woken up to the fullness of God's instructions, where they want to go to a commune. Yeah. They want to get together with a bunch of other people, buy some land, and live out there and isolate themselves so they can practice Torah alone. And that is not Torah. Unclean spirits will come into that commune as fast as they come into the city that you moved out of.
Very true. Very true.
We're not at the kingdom come yet. We're in the dispersion, and we will be, according to Scripture, until Yeshua returns the second time the kingdom comes. We must be a light where we are. I'm not saying you can't get a homestead. I'm not saying you can't live out in the country.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you can't take measures to protect yourself from potentially violent situations in your vicinity. I'm just saying isolating yourself and not engaging with others to show the love of God to them is not Torah. I'll let you guys do with that what you will, and just let it work on you. Just let it marinate. Take it if you want. If not, I'm just saying they can drop a hellfire missile on your Torah commune just as fast as they can in San Francisco. You're not safe. You're not alone. You're not protected like you think you might be just because you moved out away from mass populaces. So you just pray and ask God to direct you so that you can be the most effective, because this is what I pray for a long time. I even prayed it yesterday in front of my wife. Acts 23, until David accomplished the purposes that Yahweh had for him in his generation, he did not die. And so I pray that over myself since I was 18. That, Father, you would keep me alive until you have accomplished the purposes you have for me in my generation. That's my prayer, my belief. I stand on it in faith. And I would encourage all that mindset to everyone listening. Do not hidey hole yourself. Do not retreat. That's not how you grow. That's how you become an easier target for the enemy. So we can move on to Q&As. Put them in all caps if you have any questions. All capitalization so we can easily see them, and the moderators can see them and help us as well.
Yeah, the literal command to come out of Babylon happens at a specific time. It's not just a general command that any country you're living in that's not a believing country, you need to somehow come out of it, because first of all, you can't come out of it. Like literally you can't. I mean, even if you move to another country, you're still in we know this world is basically Babylon, you know. So yeah, let's not misapply that passage out of context. Yeah, the other point people are making in the chat about that's also how you become a cult. Yeah. That's the other concern.
Yeah. Kingdom Way is asking, I've heard your teaching on Kingdom Come. Where does 2 Peter 3:10 fit in? It seems to me to parallel Revelation 27-9. What's your interpretation? I've actually tried to show a breakdown on this in the past. I don't have it available right now. I apologize. But if you look into the Greek words, it talks about the heavens disappearing with roaring fire and things like that. To my understanding, it's just talking about the second coming, where he's removing the first firmament, rolling it back like a scroll so that the kingdom can come down. It's why the surrounding context talks about the day of the Lord events and the second coming and him routing out the wicked and destroying them. Let me actually open up the passage just real quick, and we can take a look at some of the surrounding context together. But it's I don't put it at the end of the millennial reign, which is what I think you're referring to in Revelation 27 through 7-10. I put it at the second coming. So I'm going to put this on screen for us real quick. So let's start in verse 8. Beloved, do not let this one thing escape your notice. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness, but is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and its works will be laid bare. So without going into a full breakdown on Joel chapter 3 and Matthew 24:29-31, just to give you a short summary real quick, the angels return with Yeshua through the sky as the firmament's being rolled open like a scroll, Isaiah 34:4, Revelation 6, 9-11, Matthew 24:29-31. And preceding, the New Jerusalem's coming behind them, but preceding them, the first thing coming through the firmament on the day of the Lord is Yeshua and a bunch of angels. Different groups of angels go to different places. Some of them go to pick up the resurrected saints and take them to the New Jerusalem to be stowed away, to be spared from the wrath that's about to happen. The rest of the angels are warrior angels that are going to fulfill the Joel 2 and Joel 3 moments, where they go and burn all the land where the New Jerusalem is going to sit down. Before they burn it, they're actually going to be removing people out of it. Zephaniah chapter 1. They go house to house and move everyone out of it. They're going to be pulling people out of cellars, out of domes, out of deep underground, whatever's. They're going to be pulling people out of sky rises. They're going to be removing people from the land. The people that fight them, they're going to kill them and then remove their dead body from the land. The armies that are there, the Battle of Armageddon, they have to fight that. There's going to be bloodshed up to the horse's bridle. That has to be burned and cleansed with fire. So after the warfare, after the battles take place, and the prevailing, which is a term in military term for after the battle's won, you've got to clean up the battlefield and take care of the details. So after the prevailing has happened, then that whole area has got to be leveled and cleansed with fire so that it can be the foundation that's purified for the New Jerusalem to set down. And that's my understanding of that particular reference there on the day of the Lord. Hope that's a help to you, brother. Dreg, I don't know. It doesn't give us any extra details about these particular people that were resurrected back to their mortal bodies. These people did not participate in the first resurrection event, which is where you get in a spiritual, immortal body. that only happens at one moment at the seventh trumpet on the day of the Lord, the return of Yeshua, like I just mentioned. So these people were just regular resurrections, similar to how Lazarus was resurrected, like the little girl Elisha raised from the dead in 2 Kings. Like these are just regular resurrections that happened around this time period. And those people probably lived out their life and astounded many people. And who knows what happened? It doesn't tell us, unfortunately, but they eventually died and are waiting the first resurrection of eternal life, just like everyone else. Salty Dog 72 is asking, when's the marriage supper of the Lamb? That's after the second coming of Christ, and that's taking place inside the kingdom, which is why people that try to sneak in are thrown out, according to verses 9 and 10. But that would be my understanding of it. And it's also a Passover, to my best knowledge. Torah Prospector is asking, please describe the concept of redeeming and how it relates to Yeshua redeeming us. Depends on the context you're using. The redeeming factor is usually referenced to Sheol holding your soul in preservation and you being redeemed out of there. So the initial, I should say original, the early reference to the idea of redeeming something was used in the law of God. And I believe it's in Leviticus 26 or 27. Where someone was donated to Christ or to the temple for service, and then if that family wanted to get them back early, they would pay a fifth on top of what was loaned out to them to redeem them. It was called the redemption price. So they would pay extra in order to redeem that person back and have them back into their family for service to their family instead of service to God's temple. So that's where the concept of redeeming came from. But then that language is used of the resurrection, how Christ redeems our soul from Sheol, as spoken of in Psalm 49, verses 7 through 15. So hopefully that's a decent, well-rounded answer for you, brother. Hunter's asking, what do you think Mount Olympus is made of? Hard to tell, brother. I do think there's real land there, but what is it actually holding it up? Some people, according to the ancient Greeks, it was some sort of clear, transparent, double-gated dome. I personally think it's made of some sort of crystalline material, but I don't know exactly what that is. Dreg is asking, Matthew 24, 34 through 35, hasn't the generation always already passed? I talk about this in multiple. You may be new, so I'm going to try to give you a short answer again, but we've talked about this in multiple videos. I'm going to be doing another video soon as I do chapter 24 of our New Testament Context for Pastors, which I've almost completed and have ready. And there's two different times that's being asked by the disciples in Matthew 24, 1 through 3. You have to go and read it slowly. The disciples ask him, what will be the signs of the end of this age? And, second question, tell us about the signs of your coming. So the end of the age was what was already prophesied for that temple that was standing at that time to be destroyed. And then another temple is not going to be established until the New Jerusalem comes down. So that's because that is the temple of God, Revelation 21:1, as well as verse 10, as well as verse 22. So that there's two different time frames of prophecy being asked about. When's the end of this age, and then when's the time of your coming? And a lot of people get confused because then Yeshua is answering and Matthew's recording it. And I'll be honest with you guys, I think Matthew, let me just put it like this. Matthew, being under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, I don't want to say he did a poor job writing. I just want to say I would have definitely written it down a little more clearer, because you have to really understand the prophecies about the destruction of the second temple at the end of that age, which was prophesied all the way back in Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Testament of Levi and the book of Enoch and other places. That was prophesied for that priesthood to be corrupt, cause judgment, and for that temple to go away, and then the time of the Gentiles to come, and there's not another temple until the New Jerusalem arrives. So that's part of the dialogue being explained, and then another part of it goes into him and his actual second coming. And you just have to really understand prophecy to understand the context of when he makes the switch and how he's talking. So this is why it gets tricky. I promise you. I'm sorry. It's not the clearest answer. You'd have to kind of do a breakdown. It's a 2-hour breakdown, unfortunately. You have to compare it with Luke 17 and other passages as well, and it makes it more clear. Andrew Christian Chenault is asking, was Adam created? Okay, so you got multiple questions. Was Adam created circumcised? I would say yes, because he was in the garden. 2, do you find it kind of interesting how movies depict the cube? Islam, Judaism, there's an obsession with the cube. yeah. We talk about the cube in my 42 series, and it was called Cult of Saturn. I reviewed the cube symbolism and its meanings and how often it's used and everything. So yeah, it's definitely there. For the time being is asking, can you please clarify fasting through Shabbat, since we are commanded to eat, drink, and give thanks? Thank you. Yes. Okay. So can I clarify fasting through Shabbat? I'm guessing this is the Jubilees discussion that we answer like once every 2 months about why were people commanded to fast 40 days if there's a Shabbat in between. In the same way that the priests are commanded to work on Shabbat in the temple and are held guiltless, it's a direct command from God. So there's the general principle, but then there's direct commands from God that sometimes conflicts or supersedes the general principle, but it's still not for personal gain. It's for drawing closer to God. In the same way, the priests working in the temple are there to help people draw closer to God on the Shabbat, to receive sacrifices, to receive worship, to read from the scrolls. In the same way, Yeshua is told to go fast, led by the Spirit in the wilderness, and that extended past multiple Shabbats. And we don't exactly know how he fasted either. That's another thing that you want to keep in mind. But in the same way, Moses was called for 40 days, 2 different times. In the same way that Abraham and the Apocalypse Abraham, Elijah was called to fast. Ezra, I believe Ezra fasted 40 days in Second Ezra, or maybe it was just 7. I think it was 40. But the point is, they're all being directly called by God to draw closer to God. So it's like it's a direct command by the Father. So they're held guiltless for missing things that are happening in the meantime because they're being brought directly to the Father. I hope that makes any sense. Like that's a. So, for example, let's look at Moses. No one ever asks. Everyone else always worries about and for the time being, I appreciate your question. I'm kind of bounce and expound a little bit. You may not have asked in this vein, so please don't take offense. But everyone always asks about the Jubilees thing because they think that it somehow contradicts, right? They think, oh, well, it says no fasting on Shabbat, but what happens when Moses was up there for 40 days and there was multiple Shabbats that went, and Jesus fasted over multiple Shabbats as he fasted for 40 days. Moses was away from the people in a multitude of other regards. That was his responsibility to not only away from his family as a first and foremost primary role of responsibility. He was away from the priestly duties that he was while he was not commanded under the sons of Aaron specifically, he was clearly as a prophet there to help, to teach, and to like chapter 18 shows us he's already doing as a leader of the people, to the point where the people are literally saying, where's Moses? He was the one teaching us. Now he's gone. So we're going to have to, they're getting tempted to go worship Baal again. So Yahweh didn't hold Moses guilty for neglecting his duties during that 40 days, which he had already been assigned to be over those duties. He was the leader of all the people as the head teacher, right next to Aaron, on par with Aaron. So like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like in the practical, he also didn't work for 6 days out of the week like we're commanded in Exodus chapter 20. So Yahweh's not holding him guilty for not working 6 days out of the week and going and fasting for 40 days, spending time in the presence of God. No, because he's in the presence of God as a direct command to come draw close to me. So in the same way, the priests aren't held guilty for doing their instructed duties on the Sabbath. If the Father calls someone like a priest or a prophet to specifically fast and it overlaps over a Sabbath, he's not going to hold them guilty. Just like he's not holding them guilty for not maintaining their priestly duties in the temple during the time that they were gone. So no one ever really brings this concept up. It's like a very pointed, and I'm not saying this young man was doing this for the time being, but we've heard this so often. Yeah. It's like a very pointed, subjective criticism of Jubilees only, while they forget all the other parameters of Scripture, of Torah.
I give them Matthew 12:5, and they just ignore it. They just completely ignore that Jesus himself said, clearly sometimes God's people are commanded to do things that would seem to break a command or go against a command, but they're not. They're held blameless because that's not the issue. The issue is what's more important to do at that time. So obviously Israel needed their priesthood to be working on the Sabbath. I mean, that's just part of how he built things. So and the other reality is it's like five people in all of the scriptures that we have access to who were prophets of the Lord, directly called into that office, who seem to have direct communications with angels on a regular basis, like in person.
Yeah.
They were directly commanded by the Father to go do those 40-day fasts, but the majority of people we see in the scriptures are never commanded to do that, and we never see them doing 40-day fasts or even 7-day fasts. So that would be the other thing that I think a lot of people kind of just ignore.
Miriam is asking, is getting up before sunrise every morning a command? And she's saying she's pulling it from the wisdom of Solomon. There's a lot of proverbs that encourage you into specific behaviors, but it doesn't mean that they're direct commands of Yahweh, because it's talking about wisdom behaviors. If you want to take it as a direct command to you, you're welcome to, but that's not feasible for everybody to do, or to, some people don't do that. So is it something that everyone should adopt and practice? I don't know. I'd have to actually look at the verse, if you actually have the specific verse, but I know that the wisdom of Solomon doesn't tout itself to be, how do I say this? It doesn't introduce itself to be as a prophet of the Lord speaking instructions from the Lord. It's a commentary that's held as divine inspiration, because it talks about the history of Israel while mixing in many of the proverbs, many of the principles we see from the proverbs that align with the teachings of Torah, if I could put it like that. So it is considered inspired by many groups, but at the same time, what do you think, sweetie? I'll let you jump in on this.
I think I don't see an actual command for that echoed anywhere in what we would consider law type scriptures, because obviously Sean and I like to say that Torah is pretty much everything that God gives us. It's all his instructions, but there are clear, thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that. I don't see any thou shalt rise before the sun commands.
Well, even David talks in one of the Psalms about how I rise at night to praise you, Father. Or I rise in the middle of the night to praise you, or something like that. But it doesn't mean it's an actual command.
I will say that a few months ago, I took a little course that talked about getting sunlight, specifically sunlight from sunrise in your eyes in the mornings, and how our bodies are designed to need that specific those specific infrared rays from the sun, and how it helps regulate our hormones and things like that. So if you can get up before sunrise and see the sunrise and be out in that sunlight, it's really good for your health, for your hormones, for your cortisol levels, but it's not an actual command. There was a question up there that I wanted to answer that you.
Which one?
This one.
Okay. Shooty Mac is asking, is it transgression of the Torah to make prescribed controlled substances, to take prescribed controlled substances?
So in terms of Torah, first and foremost, you would always want to be looking at ingredients in any of your medications that are being prescribed to you, because a lot of them may have unclean ingredients. So I would say where it comes into an actual transgression of Torah would be if you're ingesting something that's unclean that you're not supposed to ingest. This can be a hard topic, because some people take a very straight line stance and call all medications everywhere pharmakia. Sean and I don't have that opinion. We see pharmakia as specific abuse of certain drugs and herbs designed to bring about a certain kind of high that is, used within sorcery and channeling and prophesying and things like that. So think of like, what were they called? The oracles back in the days of Greece and Rome and things like that. So definitely, if you're being prescribed something, you want to be looking at the ingredients. As someone who has struggled with addiction, I would say controlled substances are something that really only you can decide if that's something that you should be putting into your body, because if you're the type of person who will get addicted to that, because controlled substance to my mind means like a narcotic. It's not just a heart pill or a blood pressure medication. It's, pain pills or anxiety meds. I had a surgery a couple years ago, and I took pain meds for that. I really needed the pain meds. I didn't get any refills on it. I didn't feel out of control with them. So I don't feel like I transgressed any laws. I used them as I was directed to use them, and stopped using them when I didn't need them anymore. But at earlier times in my life, I was on anxiety medications that I absolutely abused, and I stayed on them for years because they made me feel good. And they got me definitely out of sobriety. I was not sober in spirit on those medications. So, yeah, that's something that you really have to weigh for yourself, person to person. But as far as transgressing Torah, not necessarily, unless there's unclean ingredients in it. So I would encourage you to really just know your own limits with that kind of thing.
Yeah. And real quick, I'm going to share something for us in this vein. It's from the words of Sirach. And one second, guys.
What are you doing to us, babe?
Hang on. I don't know what this is doing. There it is. I don't know why I did. Oh, that's weird. Let's do this. Let's do that. Okay. So in the words of Sirach, it says, now I got to sneeze. Hang on. Let's see if I can stop it. So,
say pickle.
Pickle?
Yeah.
I'm going to sneeze. Hang on.
I've always been told if you say pickle when you have to sneeze, then you won't sneeze.
Wait, I'm going to hold it. I got it.
It's because you said pickle.
I got it. Pickle. Okay, sorry. So it says, honor physicians for their services, for the Lord created them. For their gift of healing comes from the Most High. They're rewarded by the King. The skill of physicians makes them distinguished in the presence of the great. They are admired. The Lord created medicines out of the earth, and the sensible will not despise them. This is what we were talking about, sister, about, I think Shruti, I think you're a lady. Let us know in the comments. But this is what we're talking about looking at the ingredients, like she said at the beginning. Was not water made sweet with a tree in order that its power might be known? That's in Exodus chapter 16, I believe, or 15, I believe. And he gave skill to human beings that he might be glorified in marvelous works. By them the physician heals and takes away pain. The pharmacist makes a mixture for them. God's work will never be finished, and from him health spreads over all the earth. My child, when you're ill, do not delay, but pray to the Lord. He will heal you. But give up your faults and direct your hands rightly, and cleanse your heart from all sin. Offer a sweet-smelling sacrifice and a memorial portion of choice flour, and pour oil on your offering as much as you can afford. Then give physicians their place, for the Lord created them. Do not let them leave you, for you need them. There may come a time when recovery lies in the hands of physicians, for they too pray to the Lord that he grant them success in diagnosis and in healing for the sake of preserving life. Those who sin against their maker will be defiant towards the physician.
Interesting.
So that's from the book of Sirach.
Yeah, now obviously we need to use discernment in modern times because a lot of physicians are using lots of things that are not good for us.
Like we said, check the ingredients.
Yeah, and that are unclean. If you're talking about anxiety medications, I would really encourage you to just not be on those and go get some help to learn how to learn natural ways to deal with anxiety, because those, for me, they just got me high. And that was the only reason they took away the anxiety, because I was too high to care. So I would definitely encourage anyone to try and get off of those. But as far as like pain medication, if you have had a surgery, if you've got an actual injury, and if you don't have a history of addiction, and if you haven't come to terms with your history of addiction and learned how to manage that, I would also encourage you to, use your discernment with knowing your own limits with those kind of things. What did we feed this dog?
All right, Christina Lasaditz is asking, I'm sorry, I don't know. I definitely didn't say your last name right. Christina is asking, in some Torah groups, they mention not even sign petitions to the World Health Organization or political persons, as this is against Yah's will. What are your thoughts on this? Isn't that a way to stand for truth? I don't know exactly which groups you're talking about. There's a whole bunch of very zealous and isolating groups of people that claim Torah observance out there. So you just want to, study your scriptures first and foremost. Okay. But as far as you trying to address grievances with a particular politician in whatever city, county, state, region, or whatever that you live in, you will not be like, it's not against the Torah to go talk to the leaders, for one. There's nothing in Torah that says you can't go talk to your leaders. Daniel spoke with Nebuchadnezzar and Darius, and like Daniel
Was he
spoke
part
to,
of their court?
literally, like he
Yeah.
was an advisor to help them
Yeah.
not make horrific decisions. So we have a different system of government than a monarchy. But the point is, if we disengage completely, they're going to do whatever they want, and they'll have never be
Yeah.
called to account.
Yeah.
So I don't see anything in the scriptures that tells us not to try to speak or engage for positive change with whatever leadership, even if it's a government that we don't trust all the way, because they do fear the people.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah.
They absolutely do. Again, they're not as powerful as they want you to believe. They fear the people's opinion. So I don't see anything in Torah against it. And if it's feasible and it's, efficacious to you, then you should do it.
Yeah, I see a lot of people in this crowd. I mean, they'll accuse you of idolatry if you vote and say, oh, you're directly participating in the Babylonian system if you vote. Meanwhile, those people pay their taxes, they pay their insurance, they have registration, they have license plates on their cars, they have a license to drive, they participate in this society and this system in all these other ways. They're on Facebook condemning other people for these things. They get gas at the pump, they buy groceries, they're engaged in all these other ways. But if you vote, you're part of the system. Actually, first of all, we do live in a country that's designed, we're a republic, we're supposed to be part of the system, we're supposed to be responsible for our own governance. That's kind of the point.
Right.
Now, I can understand people being disillusioned specifically by the presidential elections as we've seen them, because it does seem like in that process, those men seem to be selected and not elected. But that doesn't change all the power that you have on a community, state, and local level, where you literally have a say in what's going on in your direct community, which is, in my opinion, the most important vote.
Yeah, the 10th Amendment separation of powers is a problem for the
Right.
global elite,
Right.
because the governments of the individual states themselves can pass laws that disagree. I mean, that's literally how they got weed passed in so many states for so long.
Yeah.
They just outright thumbed their nose to the federal government and said, no, they're going to legalize marijuana in those states. And another, like with the whole abortion thing right now, where some states are not persecuting, it's a horrible word. Some states are actually imprisoning doctors that are going to perform abortions because they've outlawed it in their state. So, there's individual separation of powers within our government. This is another problem of why they took civics out of schools.
Yeah.
People don't understand how the government works.
Sean and I moved to Wyoming because of the politics here and how people vote here, and how we saw when we were in Colorado how most of our neighbors wanted to go right along with the Branch Covidian cult mentality of shut everything down and find people who won't get jabbed and all this crazy stuff. And we came up to Wyoming and they were like, we closed down for 2 weeks. We realized this didn't really make a difference. We realized the diapers on our faces don't do anything. Live how you want. Nobody harassed anybody who didn't have a mask on. They had condiments on their tables at the restaurants. They weren't bringing you your little things that ketchup, because somehow that keeps you from getting COVID. So, we came up here, we realized there's not a single Planned Parenthood in this state because of the way people have voted. There are more guns than there are citizens in this state because of the mentality of the people who live here. And it goes all the way back to the Old West and the homesteads and the cattle barons. And they're kind of, thumbing their nose at the federal government saying, no, you can't come in here and dictate how we live. So absolutely. I mean, everybody saw how Florida did during 2020 and how.
I love you, baby. I have a debate in an hour. I'm going to wrap this up.
Oh gosh. I didn't realize it was that early. So anyways, it matters if you vote on a local level, and we would not say that that's against Torah or idolatry.
Last question, very simple answer. Share your faith. How do you not have doubt? Share your faith. You're gonna be excelled as the Spirit tries to speak through you when you share your faith, and you may face persecution, which will only increase your faith.
And also
share your faith.
Pray about it. If you're struggling, sometimes I struggle with doubt and fear, and I ask the Father to take that away from me and give me.
I don't know exact doubts she's talking about, but if you're talking about your actual faith in God as a whole, share your faith and watch it explode and be stronger and stronger. So, but if you're talking about general doubts and fears of life, prayer is always a good thing. Pray without ceasing.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for being here. I need to end the show. We got a debate coming up later. The links are already in our community posts on YouTube. And I may be streaming. I'm not sure. I know it's on his channel, but I'm just trying to figure out if I can work out the technology on my side. So we'll see. Thank you guys so much for being here. Hope you have enjoyed your Sabbath today, and just follow the Lord. And we hope to see you next time.
Shabbat shalom, guys. Have a great
Shabbat
week.
shalom.